TESOL Pop, Season 6, Episode 2. Hello and welcome to TESOL Pop, the mini podcast for busy teachers. My name is Laura and joining me today to talk about LGBTQIA+ identities in the English language classroom is Peter Fullagar. Peter is an independent ELT diversity, equity and inclusion consultant, editor and writer from the UK who works with various leading publishers within the industry. He was a teacher for over 17 years, and 6 years ago he decided to become self-employed. Since then, he has edited and written exam practice materials, student and teacher workbooks, and diversity guidelines. Peter, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your time.
Hi Laura, thank you so much for inviting me. So yes, my name is Peter and my pronouns are he and him, and it's so good to be here to talk about LGBTQIA+ inclusion and why I think it's essential.
A good place for us to start, I think, Peter, is just to navigate that rather long acronym. Could you explain what LGBTQIA+ identity means?
Absolutely, yes. It's rather a long acronym. A lot of people choose not to use the whole acronym. They may just say LGBT plus or maybe LGBTQ plus. But to go through it, and these are kind of definitions from Stonewall. So the L stands for lesbian, so a woman who has a romantic and or sexual attraction to other women. Gay is for men who have a romantic sexual attraction towards other men, but also gay can be almost like an umbrella term for the lesbian and gay sexuality. The B stands for bisexuality. So this is really an umbrella term for someone who has a romantic and or sexual attraction to more than one gender. Trans is really another umbrella term, which means that someone's gender doesn't fit or doesn't sit comfortably with the sex that they were assigned at birth. And within this umbrella, there's also non-binary, gender fluid. So there's quite a few terms that people choose maybe for themselves. The Q for me stands for queer. Queer can be offensive for some LGBT plus people, but other people find that it's more empowering to use it. Other people use it for questioning, so people who are thinking about their identity. I is intersex, so where people may have biological attributes of the binary sexes. Asexual, where there may be no romantic or sexual attraction or varying degrees of it. And the plus is for the further identities, which I won't go into because there are a lot, but things such as pansexual, things like that.
Why is it so important that we make space for these various identities in the English language classroom particularly?
Well, at the moment, we don't exist in English language teaching materials. We, like so many other marginalized communities, but of course, at the moment, I'm just talking about LGBT plus. And we do exist. We are people. We exist in societies, and by representing LGBTQIA plus identities in materials, we're showing maybe role models. We're showing students that maybe people like them do exist. For non-LGBT plus students, it's maybe an opportunity to help erase discrimination or to stop prejudice. It's I like to use the word usualize, and I have to say this is not a word I've coined myself. It comes from the magnificent Sue Sanders, who is she's a pivotal figure in the UK LGBT plus community. And she used usualize rather than normalize. So Because if we say, oh, we want to normalize LGBTQIA plus identities, it kind of implies that they are abnormal.
Mm.
And of course, we're not. Um, so by usualizing, showing LGBT plus people in usual situations at work, doing hobbies, where their identity isn't necessarily something to be discussed or something to be controversialized. Um, so yeah, I think that we and other marginalized communities, we deserve to be seen, we deserve to be represented. Um, and I think we owe it to the students who maybe are questioning themselves to see representations and to know that maybe they're not alone, um, in who they are, because it's something we can't change.
So, for today, I know you've prepared some examples and tips to help teachers make their classes more inclusive and to celebrate diversity. What is the first example that you would like to share today?
Okay, so yes, the first example that I'd like to talk about is when teachers maybe teach about families. You might know that in many ELT course books, the type of family that is presented is usually a traditional, typical nuclear family that consists of a mother, a father, and probably two children. There are so many different types of families, not just LGBTQIA plus families. And one thing that I do like to say about this is that if we do present a family that has maybe two mothers or that has two fathers, I wouldn't present this as a gay family, or I wouldn't present it as a lesbian family. To me, it is just a family. And I think that's really important to not put that label on it to kind of highlight that it's somehow different when it's really not. It's a family unit. And the same goes for maybe a solo parent or a single parent or for adopted children in a family. Even within the LGBTQIA plus community, um, I think it's quite clear that in some cases, the biological family doesn't necessarily accept who their child is. And so we have this idea of the chosen family, and that is
Mm.
who doesn't have to be LGBT plus, but it's someone who kind of treats maybe a very close friend or close group of friends as their family. And this is something that isn't seen in ELT materials. And I think by kind of expanding and exploring different types of family is one way that we can include more, any LGBT plus identities.
So that's a really great first example. And I know you've got two others in the bag. So
Mm.
what's the next one that you want to share?
The next one I want to talk about is pronouns. And this has had some negative things said about in the press and in the media, but really, pronouns, and here I'm talking about the use of they and them for potentially trans people or non binary people. Um, and pronouns are something that we use every day, we use all the time. And when it's presented in course books, it's always he, she, in that order, which I also disagree with. But
That's a good
he,
point.
she, and it. And so when I write my materials, I often try to flip it and say she, he, but also to include they, because they, of course, we can use as a singular person. Um,
Mhm.
if a person chooses to use that, they don't have to, but if they want to, then it's really up to us to respect that and also to teach about it. Because if we usualize, it's that word again, usualize, if we usualize pronouns in course books or in ELT materials, it kind of demonstrates that trans people and non binary people do exist and they do deserve to be seen. They do deserve to be recognised and represented. And adding they and them in a singular table is probably the simplest thing that someone could do. So that's my second one.
And that easily slides into what teachers already have. I think we can relate to that piece in the course book when talking about pronouns, just spending a little bit of time and doing some concept checking questions and allowing students to ask questions as well. It can have a huge effect, and it's probably 5 more minutes maybe of conversation added onto your classroom time and no further materials needed. So that's a really simple and practical tip that you shared for number 2. You've given us 2 fantastic tips about the family unit that you spoke about earlier and supplementing materials if needed to kind of keep things open, and pronouns and exploring other pronouns that we can use to be inclusive and thinking about people's identity. There's a final and third tip or example that you'd like to share. Take it away. What's the final one?
There is. And this is more to do with, again, supplementary visuals more than most, because as we know in ELT course books, the images that we see, well, there are no LGBT plus images. And so if a teacher brings in some extra images to show the class, or whether it's in a physical classroom or online, then I would suggest getting some, I suppose, perceived to be LGBT plus identities. And there are free image websites out there where you can find these sorts of images. And let's say, for example, that there is a topic of hobbies, for example, and maybe you have a male and a female couple, I don't know, water skiing. I don't know whether we see that in classes, but well, there we are. And maybe another couple doing pottery, and maybe a group of friends playing football or cricket, and to have what may be an LGBT couple. Now, again, this doesn't have to be highlighted. So I wouldn't say, so this is a heterosexual couple playing cricket, and this is a lesbian couple playing football, for example. It would just be a couple playing football, a couple playing cricket. And just to leave that implication there, but it's showing, or it's demonstrating, a much wider variety of identities that students may take in one way. For example, they may think the couple are sisters or brothers, for example, but that's their interpretation of it. I think it all depends on what the impression is from the students. So that is my final point, really, to try to incorporate more, I suppose, more same-sex couples within imagery, visuals, but not necessarily to highlight that you intend this as a gay couple or a lesbian couple.
Thank you so much, Peter, for your time today and for sharing these insights. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been wonderful.
So for more ideas and inspiration on LGBT plus inclusion in the language classroom, you can find Peter on LinkedIn as well as Facebook and Instagram at LGBTQ in ELT, or you can check out his website at peterfullagar.co.uk. And as always, I provided the links in the show notes and on the TESOL Pop website so you can find those easily. If you have a question that you'd like us to answer, or you have a topic that you'd like to pitch for an episode of TESOL Pop, then you can contact us via Instagram, Facebook, or the website tesolpop.com. Finally, you can support the work we do at TESOL Pop by leaving a rating and review wherever you listen to the podcast, sharing TESOL Pop content with your teaching community, or even buying us a coffee at ko-fi.com/TESOL Pop.